And now we're going to have a few words from our director of the Center for Environmental Excellence, Ms. Karen Puckett. All right, Ms. Puckett, I understand that you're going to tell us a little bit about the Environmental Training Institute and some of the programs that we have.
Yes, thank you, Shane. I appreciate the introduction and want to welcome you all to Earth Day with UTA 2021 as well. I think those videos that we just saw really illustrate why we're here today. UTA hosts this free Earth Day event annually to recognize the importance of climate control, natural resource conservation, and safety and healthy environments in all communities. This event is brought to you by the UTA Environmental Training Institute and the Center for Environmental Excellence. Our Environmental Training Institute offers in-person, online, and asynchronous training classes, including professional certifications for environmental practitioners. We invite you to check out our course catalog and schedule on our website and enroll today in other courses. The Center for Environmental Excellence provides project management and environmental staffing for clients to help them meet their environmental needs. According to earthday.org, more than 1 billion people in 192 countries now participate in Earth Day activities each year. That makes this the largest civic observance in the world. Today, we're happy you're here to be part of Earth Day and help further environmental responsibility across the globe. 2020 marked the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. For half a century, citizens of the world have increased awareness of mankind's responsibility to be good stewards of the planet. Regretfully, UTA was unable to conduct its observance of this important milestone last year due to the pandemic. However, we're pleased to have over 230 people registered to participate in today's event, and that's the most we've had registered since we began this tradition. Today's event marks UTA's commitment to sharing environmental knowledge and awareness with you. When life around the world returns to normal, our world cannot be business as usual. We have the ability to make a difference in every industry, but that can only happen when we work together. Restoration is important to fighting climate change and making the Earth a safer, healthier, and more equitable place to live. We all have the opportunity to step up and make a change in our own personal and business practices, and your participation today is one of those opportunities. Our agenda today provides information and resources to help Texas businesses and the public safeguard our natural resources. We'll be discussing spill prevention controls and countermeasures. Due to the danger oil spills cause to public health and the environment, it's important to prevent oil spills and clean them promptly if they occur. Today we'll hear about the spill prevention control and countermeasure rule to help facilities that prevent discharge of oil into waters or shorelines, and also give you a lot of detail about developing your own spill prevention control and countermeasure plans. We'll also hear about TCEQ's public education section programs. The TCEQ works with regulated entities, industries, and manufacturers to implement pollution prevention, recycling, and innovative environmental programs. They provide education opportunities through seminars and workshops on regulations, and they hold an annual environmental trade fair and conference as well. We'll hear about resources from the TCEQ that are available to you this afternoon. So we really do appreciate our partners, the Environmental Protection Agency and the TCEQ, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, for helping us out today with this event and being present to share the information and resources with you. It's now my pleasure to introduce our first presenter this morning, Mr. Chris Perry. Chris is an environmental protection specialist for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's Region 6 oil program in Dallas. As an oil inspector, his primary responsibilities include the inspection of facilities that use above-ground storage tanks to produce and/or store oil products. The inspections that Chris performs include review of all administrative documents for a facility, inspection of the required oil production and storage equipment, and inspection of all spill prevention and response equipment maintained by facilities. So Chris has a lot of experience and knowledge of the rules and regulations when it comes to spill prevention and control, and we are so pleased to have him here today to share that knowledge with us and answer your questions as we go along. So please help me now welcome Chris to the program.
Hey, good morning, everybody. So quick thing for me is like Shane said, it's usually super interactive when we do this face to face. And this is my third virtual session since we all went into lockdown, which makes it a little bit interesting because I can't see everybody's faces. I can't see when they get bored and go to sleep. I just can't see what's going on. So the more you guys interact, the more you shoot across, the easier it is to really relay as much as I can about this information and this regulation. Once I put my PowerPoint up, I can't see the chat. So your questions will have to go through Shane. Shane will have to kind of stop me from talking. And if you guys have listened to me in the past, once I get rolling, and it's kind of hard to get me to stop. So, you know, there's a few different things I want to share with this regulation before we start going death by PowerPoint. But remember, this regulation or this session today is just kind of covering the basics. You know, I pulled out my handy CFR that I keep at my desk at home and in my backpack usually when I'm out and about. And the regulation itself is over 100 pages long. And if you've read government regulations, that's a lot of information. So this really is covering the basics of the regulation itself. So as we go along, I'm not going to cover everything. If you have a specific question, you know, shoot it through the chat. If you have a question about the subject matter that we're covering at that time, that's usually the best time to ask that question. A lot of times, I always crack this joke, a lot of times when we're face to face, people won't ask questions because they feel I'm going to remember who it is, what company they're from, and I'm going to make sure that I come do an inspection at their facility. But I can't remember anybody's name most days, let alone my own children. So it's kind of hard for me to remember who is who. And that's just not how we work in this region. You know, we're here to really help out as much as we possibly can. We do outreach sessions throughout the year to really give everybody an idea of what they should be doing and what they should expect from us. So, you know, that's just the nitty gritty and the super easy, you know, about this. I've been around for 13 years. I've gone from being just an inspector to the last couple of years, I've been the SPCC and FRP coordinator. So I wear a couple of hats and stay crazy busy. So I'm going to show you guys some good guidance documents and things to look at because it really is hard to track myself down when you guys have questions. And really, there's only 2 people right now, 2 inspectors in the program for 5 states. So Tom and I stay crazy busy. So that should be the kind of easiest thing to kind of look at. And I am not the most technologically savvy person, so I try and you know, do as well as I can with these things. But as we go along, if I have any hiccups, hopefully I can figure it out as quickly as possible. I usually start with this one, and let me swap it. Just to give everybody an idea, I'm a very visual person. So this is kind of how I track the FRP side of the program, just to give you an idea of this is our region. We have all 5 states, everything touching Texas, including Texas. So this program is not a one-size-fits-all program. I mean, it is a very diverse community within this industry, especially here in Region 6. We guesstimate that we have about 250,000 SPCC sites. And then the subset of that is our FRP, which we have about 1,000 of those, our high-risk facilities. So you can kind of see how spread out just our FRP program is. So the SPCC is even more spread out. So it just gives a really good visual. This is how I track it. I don't track by, companies' names or anything like that. I look at colors, and colors tell me where I need to go, what I need to do. My first 10 years in this program, I pretty much stayed in Southern Louisiana. That's where the majority of our FRPs facilities actually are. And since I am prior Navy and spent a little over a decade there, when I got here and got qualified, they went, wow, you speak Coast Guard, and sent me down here, since most of these facilities are jointly regulated by the Coast Guard. So I am super savvy when it comes to offshore production, which is a big reason that we asked that question up front. We have quite a few slides that cover that, but if there's nobody here that really wants to know anything about it, we can just breeze through it. I hate death by PowerPoint, but especially virtually, this is really all we get. So this gives a good idea of our focus for the first 10 years that I was in this program. And then after that, I've kind of been all over the place. The other FRP inspector that we had basically stopped doing inspections and then retired. So I've kind of bounced around between all 5 states just so everybody gets a little bit of attention, so that everybody knows we're still out there and here to help and make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. Now, if you are from Southern Louisiana, this is a normal thing, but I love, as much as I can, getting everybody to laugh and have a little bit more fun with this, because it really is painful to sit through some of these things. But when you go to Southern Louisiana facilities, you see this all the time. So it is kind of a hazardous environment to be out at some of these production facilities, and, it's just kind of comical. So like I said, SPCC is not a one size fits all, program. It really isn't. It's left a little vague in some areas so that the engineer writing the plan makes it specific for your facility. So I like to show this at the very beginning so everybody gets a good idea of the different types of facilities that SPCC covers. It's not just one facility. We have offshore production facilities. We have offshore platforms. We have, coastal bulk facilities and coastal production facilities. We have you can tell I spend a lot of time offshore. Another offshore production, you have your normal, Northeast Texas, Oklahoma production facilities. More production facilities, gas facilities. This was actually just a normal bulk tank at a Tyson chicken factory. A normal bulk plant that we see all over the place. Marinas, and then of course our big pipeline facilities and big bulk terminals. So this regulation covers a large amount of facilities. So when I tell you guys that it's not one size fits all, it really isn't, and you have to really know what goes for your facility. This is a great page when you cannot find us. I always tell everybody, do your research, because it is so hard to track us down. But this is the SPCC page. So if there are any fact sheets or, information that you need about this program and the FRP program, this is the right place to go. So you should have this hopefully bookmarked like I do on your computer, so you can go here and get everything. Headquarters runs this page, so when they come up with a new fact sheet, when they come up with something new, they're going to put it here so that everybody can actually go through, find what they need to have. If you want our guidance document, it's here, and I'm going to show that in a minute. Our actual inspection forms, everything is here, so it's a pretty transparent program. You can go and find just about anything you need just in this one location itself. Okay, so that was the fun stuff. And now we can get on to the normal events. And if you guys have seen me talk in the past, I usually wander the whole time, which is really hard to do when you're sitting behind a desk at home, but I'm usually standing and walking around. So hopefully I don't get too far away from the computer. If I do, please somebody let me know. But this is unfortunately 137 slides of pure excitement, right? So the easiest thing that I have to start with nowadays is this. I got this from headquarters a year or so ago, and this is basically that legal disclaimer that, you know, this is a lot of information we're going to talk about today. And if I misspeak, you know, on any certain topic, the regulation is the final say so. So make sure you're following what it says. I really try and do my best to not shoot from the hip. I have no problem saying I'm not sure what the answer is. Let me find it out, because there really is a lot of information when it comes to this program. So just know I'm not perfect. I'm definitely not one of those government people that think they're perfect, and I will find out whatever answer I can to help everybody out. All right. The objectives this morning is to cover, you know, the basics of SPCC, how it's set up, what we expect from you guys, our inspection process, all of that kind of stuff. So I always start and finish with this slide right here. This is the guidance documents. This is the link that you can actually go. It's on the SPCC page that I showed you. If you are new to SPCC, or if you're seasoned in SPCC, you should have this document downloaded to your iPad or your computer. It is truly a great resource. This is the second version of that. The original one had its issues, and they worked really hard. It took them from 2005 to 2013, I think, to actually put together this version of it. This is what myself and Tom use when you ask us a question. If we don't know it off the top of our head, we go back to this document, because it really is the guidance for the inspectors. It takes those 100 pages of regulation and breaks it down into layman's terms so that you know exactly what is expected for the different situations. And I always say, it is some awesome light reading. It is something like 915 pages of, you know, just pure awesomeness, and pictures and diagrams. Really, if you need to know anything about anything of SPCC, with the exception of offshore stuff, you're going to find it in here. So you should have it. The way that the guidance document is set up, and I added this I think this last year or whatever, just to kind of give a good idea of how the guidance document itself is set up and helpful. It goes through the applicability. It goes through the stuff that we don't normally talk about, like environmental equivalence, wastewater treatment exemptions. It'll explain the ins and outs of secondary containment, impracticability, how to use oil water separators, and how oil water separators fit underneath the program. What we expect to see for diagrams, how to do your inspections, evaluations, testings at your facility. And each chapter will actually show you in there what the inspector is supposed to be looking for. So if you're not 100% sure what we're going to be looking for, you can look in here and it'll tell us, it'll explain the section and then say the role of the inspector. And you can kind of get an idea of what we're going to do if you've never seen us before or never been through an audit or an inspection from us. This is a great place to get a good idea of what it has. In the back, of course, it goes over the Clean Water Act. You know, that's what this regulation is under. It'll go through the different regulations, all the different rule revisions, because everybody knows, if you've been around for a while, this program has kind of changed, especially in 2002. They opened it up to make changes, and they made a lot of changes between 2002 and 2010. We haven't made changes since then, but those are all covered in this. Then, like I said, there are sample plans in the back. There are copies of our inspection checklist, so you can see exactly how we're gonna, or what we're gonna be using and what process we go through to conduct your inspections. And then the last one is other policy documents, like our MOUs with other agencies. And I put on there the EPA DOT diagrams. They are the most confusing things I have ever seen, but it is a good way to go look and see where the jurisdictional boundary is between DOT, PHMSA, and the EPA, because it's not as cut and dry as it is with like the Coast Guard and EPA, which we'll talk about later. So just a really good document. You should have it if you're in this program and really need to know anything. And it really is the first place you should go to get your questions answered. All right, so what is the SPCC rule, right? SPCC rule is all about spill prevention, how to keep the oil that you guys are using, selling, buying, transporting in their containers and equipment and off of the ground and out of the water. The regulation itself is 40 CFR Part 112 and includes all the requirements, not only for SPCC, but at the latter half of it is the FRP program, which is a smaller subset. We're not really going to talk about FRP today. The normal outreach session when we do SPCC and FRP is normally 7 to 8 hours, and it takes all day to go through it, and that's just the basics. To give you an idea, to be your first step in qualifying as a inspector in this program for us, you have a 40-hour class that they send you to. And that really isn't all the ins and outs, but it does give us the most information. So we're trying to cram everything we get in a 40-hour class into, less than 8 hours when we're doing all of that. So it does make it kind of interesting. Of course, the purpose is to develop plans designed to prevent oil discharges from reaching navigable waters of the U.S. Waters of the U.S. it seems to be a very moving target for a definition for that, and it changes a lot. So it's not one that I really go over in outreach sessions because it is very interesting. They put out the newest definition recently. And we are all learning what changes have been in there, but the whole point of this program is keep oil out of the water. Okay, this is the way 40 CFR 112 is structured. Basically, everybody that falls under this program gets to follow 112.1 through 7, which are all the general requirements that everybody gets to follow. And then 112.8 to 12 is dependent on what type of facility you specifically have. The more specific stuff you're going to have to follow will be in one of those portions. And then for whatever reason, I still don't understand why they skipped 13 through 19. Don't know if they just didn't like those numbers or what it was. And it jumps down to 112, 20, and 21, which is the FRP side of the house, the big response plans for our high risk facilities. In the back, you have the different appendices. You've got the memorandums in there between DOT and EPA, Coast Guard, all those kind of things. Appendix C is your substantial harm criteria section. You've got your worst case discharge planning sections in Appendix D. And then F is the big thing. That is the template that an FRP is supposed to follow. So if you are an FRP facility, basically that's where you go and you develop your plan based on that. And then of course, Appendix G is what they came up with a few years back, and it is a Tier 1 template to basically fill in the blank SPCC plan for our small facilities, which we'll go over here shortly. Okay, so as SPCC right? It requires certain facilities to develop and implement a site-specific plan, right? And that's big, site-specific, because it's amazing how often I've been here for 13 years, and I still, every single time I go out on an inspection, the plans will have very generic information in them. That's not the point of these things. These things are supposed to be site-specific. For that site, they're supposed to be developed by an engineer, basically. It's telling the facility what you have to do to be in compliance and meet what the regulations states. And that's where this regulation itself is considered a performance-based regulation, right? So we don't tell you exactly what to do. When you look at SPCC and some of the other rules, it says specifically you must inspect and you must do this, you must do this. Ours tells you, hey, you need to do inspection, and then the engineer sets all that on your plan says how you're going to meet the regulations. So performance-based, it's not just saying yes, you're meeting regulations. You're actually explaining in your plan how you meet in each individual requirements of that plan. So what we're going to look for when we go out there, when we look at your plan, we should basically be able to read it and go, okay, here's exactly how they're doing inspections. Here's exactly how they're doing their drainage. Here's the type of records they're keeping. Here's everything. So we read your plan and then we look and make sure that you're doing what your plan says to do. So if it's very generic and not set up for your facility, it's not going to help you at all. We saw that there's a large universe when it comes to SPCC. So there are a lot of smaller mom and pop facilities that really don't know a lot about the equipment per se and the tanks and what they should do to keep these things working. So that's why in the plan, the engineer is basically setting it up, telling them you need to do this. So if it's generic, those owner and operators of those facilities don't really know exactly what to do. So they need to be written site specific for that equipment, for that operator, not just a very generic covering everything. It's going to cover everything from your containment to your procedures, what to do to clean up, what to prevent it from hitting the water, what type of inspections to do. All those kind of things are going to be set up within this plan. Of course, this goes under the Clean Water Act, and I like to crack this joke too, because it's amazing how many times we'll get a call saying, hey, I had a spill, it stayed in containment. Do I need to contact the NRC and report this as a spill? Well, under our program, no, this is the Clean Water Act, not the Clean Dirt Act. So therefore, if the spill doesn't hit the water, it's not really a discharge for us, right? If it's spilled out on the dirt and in the land, make sure you're following your state regulations. But for this program, it's really all about keeping it out of the water. Like I said, it fits under 40 CFR Part 112, and this is not a new regulation. It is amazing how many times, especially in my first 10 years when I was on the coast, where I would get questions from people saying, hey, there's this new regulation out. And I'm like, whoa, it's not new. It's from the early 70s. It has been around for a long time. People just really didn't know about it. So it really has been around since the 70s. It is not delegable to other agencies. So unlike our other programs like MPDS that can be delegated down to the state level, this program, SPCC, cannot be delegated down. So if you live in Louisiana, or if you have facilities in Louisiana, Louisiana has a comparative program called the SPC program, where basically they copied and pasted the majority of the regulation over into a state reg. And they do their inspections, their water group does inspections while they're out and about based off of that. But the majority of our other states do not have anything comparable to this because it isn't delegated down to them. Okay, so this rule applies to non-transportation related facilities, right? EPA is all about non-transportation. We're about the storage and everything else. The other agencies are about transporting the oil back and forth. So the type of facilities that are regulated under this for us: drilling, producing, gathering, storing, processing, refining, right? All of these things, they are going to fit into our world. All right, so what are the SPCC criteria? It's pretty easy to follow on most of the time. Remember, it is up to the facility to identify and say whether or not they're a part of this program. So it's a non-transportation related facility, like we just went over and we're going to talk about more and more. The facility stores 1,320 gallons of oil in above ground storage tank, or has 42,000 gallons of completely buried oil storage capacity. And they have a reasonable expectation of an oil discharge to a waterway or adjoining shoreline. Now, the definition of discharge is actually under 110.3, and it's the old sheen rule, right? So it means that it causes a film or sheen upon the water surface. So that's all you have to do to have a discharge for this, is you have to make a sheen on the water. So if you've been to any marina out there, every time you let somebody refuel their boat on the water, they're causing a sheen, and technically it's a discharge under this rule. So 1,320 gallons of oil in above ground storage. right? And has a reasonable expectation of oil discharge to a waterway or adjoining shoreline, and it is up to the facility to make the determination whether they have a reasonable expectation, right? It's not up to the government. The regulation is built with a clause in there that says the EPA can come in and tell you you need an SPCC plan, but it really is up to the facility's owner and operator to do their due diligence and see if they're a part of this program. All right, now, because it's 1,320 gallons, excuse me, they went back and they said, okay, what's the smallest container we want to throw at this 1,320 gallons? And basically they came up with 55 gallons or greater. So everything 55 gallons or greater that has an oil product is counted towards the total capacity of that facility. Anything below that, the EPA looks like it's not even there. We're not counting it towards there. And they had to come up with that, because if they didn't have something like that, every Walmart would probably have to have an SPCC plan because of how many quarts of oil that they have. So 55 gallons or greater, right, is going to go towards your 1,320 gallons. All right, so here's examples of non-transportation related facilities, right? Production, whether it's onshore, offshore, refineries, marinas. We went over the pictures at the beginning. There are so many of them out there. Now, here are examples of transportation related facilities. You have your different train facilities. You've got your mobile trucks, your ships, your pipelines. But remember, that is for those vessels right there. It's not for the tanks, with exception of certain circumstances, like with pipeline breakout tanks. But when those trucks and trains and ships and barges are transferring into tanks for storage, the tanks themselves are regulated by the EPA. The vessels and trucks and everything else are regulated by the other agencies. So we get that question a lot, that, well, I shouldn't have to do an SPCC plan because we're a part of non-transportation, we're a rail yard. Well, I'm going to inspect a rail yard here in a couple of weeks because the tanks themselves actually fall under the EPA because they're storage, but the cars, the actual train that's delivering and taking the oil to and from, that's going to be DOT regulated. Okay, so SPCC applicability, right? It's the owner and operator's responsibility to make the decision on whether or not they're applicable to the SPCC regulation, right? So they're going to do their due diligence. They're going to be the ones that come up with their capacity. Here, if we have a spill, here's how far it's going to go. Okay, I'm going to hit the water. I need an SPCC plan, right? It is not a requirement to submit your SPCC plans to the EPA. We do not permit them. We do not approve them or disapprove them. There's no way we could store 250,000 SPCC plans in this region. The only ones that are submitted to us are the FRPs, which are our high risk. It's a different portion of the regulation. So if you have an SPCC plan, you set it up, you implement it, you maintain it at your facility. And then if we come by to conduct an audit or an inspection, it's there to present to us so that we can look at it, let you know if it's in compliance, what changes need to be made to it, all that kind of stuff. But it's there for you, it's not for us. The plan is, and all of its associated records are required to be there at the facility as long as it's manned for 4 hours a day. I've seen plans where they try to put all the inspections in the plan itself. It doesn't say it has to be in the plan, it has to be with the plan. So if the plan is stored there at the facility, the records are there at the facility. If the plan is stored at the nearest field office because you're a production facility, then all the records are at the nearest field office. So pretty simple, pretty easy, but it's amazing how often it doesn't happen that way. Okay, so with this group here, we sometimes do have qualified facilities. So I spent a little bit more time than normally. We just kind of breeze through this really quick. But a few years back when they were making all the changes to the regulation, what they did was they said, okay, for our smaller mom and pop type facilities, we want to find a way to kind of include them without having to have the costly burden of having it signed off by a PE. So they came up with a qualified facilities, the tier 1, tier 2 facilities. To fit under this portion of the program, you basically have to have 10,000 gallons or less of above ground storage. And remember, we're counting everything 55 gallons or more. So 10,000 gallons or less. So at that point, if you're 10,000 gallons or less, then you look at your largest container, right? So if you have no individual container greater than 5,000 gallons, you're a tier 1 facility. So 10,000 gallons or less, no one tank bigger than 5,000 gallons, you're a tier 1 qualified facility, which means you can grab that Appendix G fill in the blank plan that I mentioned earlier. And basically that's what it is. You fill in the blanks, you keep it, you follow it. It is set up pretty super simple and easy. Excuse me, it's not signed off by a PE. And there you go, you have your SPCC plan. That's all you have to do. Now, if you are 10,000 gallons or less and you do have a tank larger than 5,000 gallons, then you're a tier 2 facility, which basically means you still need a full-blown SPCC plan. You just don't have to have it signed off by an engineer. Okay, so 10,000 gallons or less, one container larger than 5,000 gallons means you're tier 2. Nothing larger than 5,000 gallons, you're a tier 1. Tier 1, pretty simple, pretty easy, fill in the blank plan. Tier 2, full-blown plan. Look at the guidance document. There's a sample plan back there. If you don't want to have a consultant and a PE, fill it out. Use the sample plan, really read through everything, and that should be pretty simple and easy. All right. So basically, for everybody that says, hey, I'm going to need an SPCC plan, it is your responsibility as the owner or operator to prepare and implement a plan. Now, I always say owner or operator and try and say that over and over and over again, because this is the big question, and we'll have the land owner and the actual operator, or the facility owner and operator, different companies, and they'll call and say, well, who has to have the plan? I think it should be the owner. No, I think it should be the operator. And we go, that's why they wrote it that direction, right? It's up to the owner and operator to figure that out. As long as there's a plan, we really don't care which one prepares it. It's just got to be there. So if you're the operator and you don't want to have to do it, you need to make sure that the owner's doing it. And if the owner doesn't want to do it, they need to make sure the operator's doing it. But if we show up to do an inspection and you need one and there isn't one, it's just going to be a bad day for everybody involved. So prepare and implement the plan if you need it. All right, so basic definitions, right? So under 112.2, that's where all the specific definitions under SPCC are located. So I always just grab a couple of ones that always seem to come up to clarify them. This does not cover all of them. So the facility, the definition of facility was changed back in, I think, 2009, right? To kind of allow the owner or operator to define the boundaries of their facility, right? So it is up to the facility to define the boundaries, right? It can be contiguous, not contiguous. Some of our airports break out the tankage versus other areas. The one thing you can't do is make your facility boundaries so small that you fall out from under the rule itself, right? So basically you can set it up how you want to. Now, we always caution, especially our production facilities, with how you define yours, because of course for a production field, you may have multiple production batteries, right? And some companies will take all of those different production batteries and throw them into one plan. Well, remember, it's total capacity. So once you bring them all together into one facility, you have to look at the total capacity. If you break the 1 million gallon mark, you now get to have an FRP on top of your SPCC plan. So it kind of changed the game for you. So just make sure how you have it set up is pretty much up to you. If you are a farm, there is some good guidance on the headquarters website on how they allow them to be kind of broken up, and a lot of it goes with their tax ID numbers. But besides that, it's really up to you guys. You can make them monstrous, and I've had a city that wanted to pull up every power station into one plan. Well, that put the city into an FRP. So it's just a little different, but that's up to you guys to define your boundaries. Now, we've got 3 different types of facilities: onshore, offshore, and complex. Onshore is pretty easy, right? I'm standing on the ground. I'm onshore. Offshore is anything on, in, or under the water, which the under part always confused me until I went to my first facility where they had basically a concrete barge that sat under the water as a storage vessel. And then that was kind of interesting. So on, in, or under the water, it doesn't matter if you're truly offshore, off the coast, if you're in a bay, if you're on a lake, they're all considered offshore. And then complex is any facility that is regulated under this program by multiple facilities. Because remember, the Clean Water Act covers so many different facilities, and SPCC and FRP, you actually have the transportation related portions also. So if you have a Coast Guard component and an EPA component, you're a complex facility. We have facilities that have all the agencies together, where they have a rail, they've got a pipeline, they've got vessels, and they have EPA. So complex facilities get a little interesting, but when you throw us all together, it's called a complex facility. All right, production facility. This is one of the ones I get beat up on for years. And recently not as much, because headquarters finally got involved and really did a good job trying to explain this. So a production facility is all structures, including but not limited to the wells, platforms, storage facilities, right, piping, everything for producing oil. But you see where it is right there at the beginning, including but not limited to the wells. It has to include the production well itself to be considered a production facility. And where this comes into play a lot of times is our gas plants or our facilities along the coast, where they're receiving product from offshore through big pipelines. The well isn't actually a part of that facility. So then it becomes a bulk storage facility. And a lot of the production guys don't like that, but this is the way they wrote the regulation. So must have a well to be a production facility. Okay. Permanently closed, right? Tom and I threw this in a few years back because this is a big thing that we find issues with all the time. We were actually looking at a facility yesterday, have this same issue. The Coast Guard has different terms for how active a facility is, but the EPA doesn't. The EPA basically says you're an active facility or you're permanently closed, right? Or portions of your facility, like your tanks and everything, can be permanently closed. For them to be permanently closed, for the EPA to look at it like it's not actually there, you have to do a couple of things. You have to remove all liquid and sludge from the tanks. You have to disconnect all the piping, not just put a pancake skillet in between the valve area, but you actually have to disconnect the piping, with the exception of the ventilation piping. Right? And then you've got to mark it as permanently closed, out of service, something like that, right? You have to do that, or we consider it still active. So we see facilities all the time that say, well, it's an inactive, or we're in caretaker status, so we shouldn't need a plan, but they still have tank bottoms in there. So all that sludge in there is still a threat of pollution. So basically what this says is you have to remove that threat, right? And you have to disconnect the piping, so you can't just turn it back on. So if you have tanks that you want to close out, you have to follow this. If we show up, or if you submit paperwork to us for the FRP reason, trying to terminate because you've closed your tanks, we're going to ask for documentation to see pictures that everything's been disconnected, everything's been cleaned out. So you must do that. If not, it's considered active. Now, our regulation doesn't say once it's permanently closed, you have to remove it. It could sit there forever, unfortunately, and just rust away. But under our regulation, it doesn't account for that. It just accounts for removing the threat of pollution by removing all the liquid and sludge and then disconnecting everything. All right, so the next one is oil and water mixtures, right? You know, it's defined in our regulation because basically mixtures fall under SPCC, right? And basically any mixture of water and oil. There is no de minimis number or percentage here. I think the Coast Guard has a de minimis percentage in theirs, but they never put one in for this. So we may have a de minimis size for 55 gallons or larger container, but there's nothing in ours that says, well, it's 99% produced water, 1% oil. And that's why all the produced water is considered oil, because it is a mixture, right? So the way our SPCC lead likes to explain it at our inspector training course is if there's one drop of oil in that container, the whole thing is oil. You may not agree with it, but if it's got a sheen on it, it's now considered oil. So if you look in the guidance documents, there are some good discussions of different types of mixtures, but yes, mixtures fall under this, and we count the entire quantity or capacity of that container all as oil because you don't break it out separately. All right, MTR facilities. So for those of you guys who have facilities that are jointly regulated between the EPA and Coast Guard, there is an exact definition of where our jurisdictional boundaries start and stop. It can be found in the Coast Guard's regulation under 33 CFR 154.1020, right? And it's the marine transportation related facility definition, not to be confused with another one that sounds almost exactly the same. And it's amazing how many Coast Guard inspectors I've seen using the wrong definition. So it makes it just as confusing for you guys as it is for them. But this is the one that the EPA has agreed with the Coast Guard on where the jurisdictional boundaries end, right? So basically, the jurisdictional boundary between the EPA and Coast Guard is at the first valve inside secondary containment surrounding the tanks in the non-transportation related portion of the facility. So if those dock lines coming in from the vessel that they're transferring into, you're going to trace those dock lines all the way back until they finally cross over the berms, dike walls, whatever containment is installed for the tanks, and then find that first valve. A lot of the problems that we run into is uneducated Coast Guard inspectors will say if you have a manifold or dock valves on the dock itself, then that counts, but it doesn't because it has to go on tanks. This comes into play when we're talking about barges because there's no real secondary containment on a barge. So the barge itself has a valve right where it comes out of the barge, and that's the jurisdictional boundary. Now, it does have at the bottom, unless another location has been agreed to by the captain of the port and appropriate federal official. So if you do not like where your jurisdictional boundary is at your facility, and I see this quite often, you can request to have a different boundary. And a lot of facilities will do this just because of the amount of piping that has to be pressure tested under Coast Guard regulations. And our regulations are different. So you can request a change, but so far in the last 13 years of me doing this, we have not approved one yet. And by other federal official, it means somebody within the EPA has to sign off on it. So our delegated authority basically is going to be the person who signs off on everything under this program would have to concur with the captain of the port to change that jurisdictional boundary. And it really doesn't happen. You have to have a good reason. Not wanting to have to pressure test is not a good enough reason for my bosses to sign off on it. We've tried, they said no. So that's what it is. So First valve inside secondary containment of the tanks. It's got to be identified if you're an FRP facility on your facility diagram, but you should really know what it is so that you have no problems with the Coast Guard or the EPA. Okay, so those were the big definitions that we seem to run into a lot of the times, right? So I'm sure there's plenty of other definitions. You can look them up in the guidance document and the regulation, kind of see what is expected to be there, but those are the big ones when we're doing a pseudo face-to-face discussion that we like to cover. All right, so like we said, as the facility owner and operator, you guys decided, all right, we have over 1,320 gallons, and if we have a spill, we could affect a waterway. So boom, we're in the SPCC world. We're so excited, right? So now what do? Well, now you get to prepare and implement a plan, right? So the facility owner operator must prepare and implement a plan in writing. Now, remember, this was written in the 1970s before everybody had a, smartphone, tablet, computer, and everything else. So even though they have not changed it in the regulation, we do understand that digital is just like writing. So you can have a digital plan. It doesn't have to be printed out. A lot of the times, if we're going to do an inspection, excuse me, we're going to request that you email us a copy of your plan so we can look at it before we ever get there. So digital is pretty much the way you guys are getting it from the consultant. If you want to print it out and have a hard copy, man, go for it. I like printed out stuff. I've got my CFR that I have paper clipped and highlighted and everything else. But when it comes to the plan, a lot of people nowadays just aren't into that. So digital is completely fine if you want to do it that way. Like I said earlier, it's in accordance with 112.7, which are all the general requirements that everybody has to follow. And any other applicable sections under CFR 112. So remember, everybody gets 112.7, and then figure out what type of facility you are, whether you're a cold storage facility, a production facility, and then you figure out which one of the 112 through 12 you fall under, and that'll give you your more specific requirements to follow. All right. So plan, preparation, and implementation for production facilities. For every other facility, you basically have to have a plan in place before you commence operations. That's just what it is. You need a plan in place so that you're not spilling oil, and you don't want to put that together after you've already started. Right? Now, the one big caveat to that is a new oil production facility. They have 6 months to get their plan in place. Now, by new does not mean that Chris went out today and bought a facility from Bob. That is now new to Chris, but that's not new to the government, right? New means you actually drilled the well. Right? So basically they built that 6 months in, because when you drill a well and you start production flow, that flow rate is going to go up and down, right? It's going to take it a while to settle out. So that allows the facility enough time to adjust what they have at their facility, what they need at their facility, and then prepare their plan based on that. I have seen multiple facilities, especially out in the bayous, where they drilled a well, they had it completely set up for crude, and not a drop of crude came out. It was all gas. And they had to go back and change everything because that changed. So that's what it is. That's why it's there. They get 6 months for a new production facility. Remember, drilled the well, start of flow of production is day 1. They get 6 months after they started the flow and drilled that well to actually get their plan in place, right? All right, so like I said, everything 10,000 gallons and less does not have to be signed off by a PE. You can, we're not going to stop you. It's really great when you do that because you have a professional engineer looking at what it is you're supposed to do, but you don't have to, right? Everything 10,000 gallons or more You have to. So if you have a 10,000 gallon tank and bring a 55 gallon drum on board, bang, you're above a tier 2 facility. So 10,000 gallons, anything above that, whether it's a gallon or whatever, you have to have a PE certification along with your plan. Okay. All right. So they must review and certify the plan and all technical amendments that you have at your facility. And we'll go over those, right? Administrative is pretty easy. When you're changing names and simple stuff, those are just administrative changes. Technical changes are you changing out equipment, whether it's tanks and piping and different equipment you have there, changing out secondary containments, changing inspection protocols, all those things that the engineer is supposed to set up. If you make any changes to those, you have to have an engineer go back and say, yes, you're still in compliance with that. Now, one of the big questions that always seems to come up is, do the PEs need to be from your specific state that your facility is at? The answer is very interesting because nobody likes it. Under this regulation, which remember is a federal regulation that is not delegable down to the state, under this regulation, it does not state that it has to be there. It just has to be a USPE. But what we always try and tell you guys is caveat with that is do your due diligence, and if your state requires that it be signed off, like any engineering program has a sign off in their state, then you need to follow what your state says. It'll keep you out of trouble. But for us, when an EPA inspector comes and looks at your SPCC plan, we're just making sure that it was stamped by a USPE. So it is up to you guys to make sure you're following your state regulations on top of these, but it is not a requirement for us. So hopefully everybody hears that, because I've had phone calls where I got my butt chewed plenty of times saying I said it didn't have to be that way. I'm like, well, your person missed part of the conversation. So it does not have to be from that state per the federal program, and we will not be looking for that during an inspection, but please follow what your state says you're needing to do, because it'll keep you out of trouble with your state. And then the last one, PEs can be employees of your facility. There's nothing in the regulation that it says has to be a third party. Excuse me, we have plenty of large companies and large facilities that have their own API 653 inspectors, their own PEs, their own. That's great. It just has to be set up by that PE. Okay, so it doesn't matter whether it's third party, internal, whatever works for us. All right, now here are the things they're going to attest to, and they have to attest to these when they sign off on the PE certification. That basically he or she is familiar with the rule requirements, that they have, or one of their personnel have visited and examined the facility. Remember, this is a site-specific program. It's not generic. So these guys need to come out, look at your facility, see what equipment you have, see what type of piping you're using, see what type of secondary containment it is, because they have to attest that it's all set up correctly. So they can't really do that virtually, right? We've had companies where they just call and say, hey, can you let me know what you have and shoot me a picture? That doesn't work. They have to actually visit the facility, and the PE is attesting to that when they sign off on this. Then they attest that the plan has been prepared in accordance with good engineering practices, right? So they're going to be looking at the industry standards for what you have at the facility and making sure everything is set up under good engineering practices. That they have set up procedures for required inspections and testing have been established, right? So what's usually going to happen is that PE is going to look and see, all right, you've got this many tanks, this type of tanks, this type of piping, this type of this. Here's the different industry standard for each different type of equipment you have. And here's how your inspections are going to be based and set up for each individual thing. Again, why it's supposed to be site specific. Excuse me. Now, if you're one of the larger facilities that has your own inspection department and everything else, The big thing I will tell you need to do is ensure when your SPCC plan is being written that the engineering staff talks to your inspection staff and they mesh up, right? Because you can't just refer over to the inspection group at your facility. It's supposed to be set up and signed off by the PE. So the PE needs to talk to them and say, hey, if it were me, we would be doing these type of inspections this often, all this kind of stuff. And then just make sure those two match up, because we have to grade you when we do an inspection based off of what your plan says, not what your company policy is. So just make sure the two talk to each other so that they match up, and then you'll be good. And then of course the plan is adequate for the facility, right? Not for the area, not for the company, but for the facility itself. It's got to be site specific. So every plan 10,000 gallons or more is going to have a PE certification attesting to numbers 1 through 5 of this attestation. Now, number 6 is, if applicable, for produced water containers subject to 112.9C6, which is the onshore production rule. Any procedure to minimize the amount of free phase oil is designed to reduce the accumulation of free phase oil, blah, blah, blah. So a lot of words saying basically if you have a skimming unit attached to your produced water tank that is removing the oil from the produced water, then basically you can follow the alternative requirements for that. Now, what we have found so far is nobody does that because it's just cheaper to put a berm around it than it is to attach all these free phase skimming units and everything else out of there. But if you are one of those facilities that decides to use this so you don't have to count your produced water as oil, then the PE needs to attest to number 6 also to make sure it meets the requirements for this portion of the regulation.
Now, Chris, before we move on, question about the definition of oil. The SPCC has been revised and has the substances as well. So in this context, what's the definition of oil? Chris, it appears you may be muted, so if you want to unmute your mic.
So it appears that when you started talking, it automatically mutes me. So that's kind of interesting. So what I was saying was there is no real definition for oil under the regulation. It doesn't make sense, but it just how it is. If it acts like an oil, if it causes a sheen on the water, then basically it can be seen as an oil. It is up to the facility, right, or the engineer writing the plan to determine if the substance acts like an oil and would be considered an oil. So it actually covers, the regulation covers everything from a vegetable oil to fish oil to crude to diesel to a bunch of different chemicals, but they never came through with a one-stop shop of lists of oils. Back in the day, if you weren't 100% sure if your substance counted as an oil, you could send it to us, and we had a person at headquarters that would actually, a chemist, that would look through it and say yes or no, it's an oil. They stopped that about 2 years ago and basically said the rule said that this is up to the facility owner or operator. So we're not going to make those determinations. The government doesn't want the liability of making those determinations for you. So, man, it's a beating. The guidance document does recommend to start with looking at the U.S. Coast Guard list of oils, which is a 2-page list of different products, whether they're real crude oil or derivatives of them and everything else. Just to see if it's on there. And then if it's not on there, you may have to do some due diligence and have an engineer really go through the chemistry behind it and say whether or not it is or isn't. I will tell you the majority of the time, if we go out to a facility and go, wow, I think this is an oil, we're going to refer back to the U.S. Coast Guard list of oils. Neither Tom nor I are chemists. So I really don't get into that and stay that far away, which is part of the reason that the EPA doesn't, make that determination. It leaves it, the reg is basically leaving it up to the facility owner or operator to make those determinations. Okay. I'm going to try something super quick, so hopefully it don't mess anything up real quick. Because I couldn't see that you told me I was muted or anything. So if I put this on my other monitor, I can at least get an idea. Okay, so plan location, like we said earlier, excuse me, the SPCC plan is required to be maintained at your facility as long as your facility is manned, which means at least 4 hours per day there's somebody at the facility. If so, your plan and inspection records are required to be there at the facility. Now, if you're at an unmanned facility, so there's somebody not there at least 4 hours a day, then it needs to be maintained at the nearest field office. Okay, so by nearest field office, they do not mean that if your facility is in New Orleans, your regional office is in Houston, you don't get to use Houston. That's not what it means, but it's amazing how often people do that. Excuse me. If you are especially a production facility where they are unmanned facility, your pumper comes out and checks those facilities every single day. Their office that they come out of is the nearest field office. So that's where the SPCC plan is supposed to be maintained. The records are supposed to be maintained because it's supposed to be used by the facility personnel. Then I throw this caveat, in this region, we're a little bit different. We rarely do unannounced inspections, even though the regulation is basically set up for unannounced all over the place. But we rarely do them. If we do an unannounced inspection, it's normally because there was a complaint or a spill at your facility. And we're just going to show up. If not, we usually try and schedule our inspections with you guys, make sure that you're prepared, all that kind of stuff. But the regulation is written so that if we show up unannounced, everything that you're supposed to have is actually there. Oh, I love computers. All right. Reportable discharge history. Okay. So 112.4 is basically where your discharge history is going to fall under. The gallon amount is set up either as 1,000 gallons or a barrel, which is 42 gallons. It does not include discharges that result from natural disasters, active war, terrorism, right? But vandalism is different and it does need to be included. That's why you have security requirements. Facilities have they have a reportable oil discharge after self-certifying an SPCC plan, do not automatically lose their eligibility. So if you're a tier 1, tier 2, and you have a spill, you don't automatically lose the ability to not have a PE sign off on it, but it does allow us to look at what the problem was and then may require that you have a full-blown plan. So the way this is set up under 112.4, basically if you have one discharge of 1,000 gallons, right? Or if you have two discharges of 42 gallons or more within a calendar year, you have to submit a 112.4. Now remember, the definition of discharge is on the water, right? So if you lose 1,000 gallons, but only 20 gallons get in the water, your actual discharge amount is what hit the water itself, not what actually came out of the tank, right? So that's pretty important because a lot of our facilities will have spills that'll stay in containment, and that's great. That means your containment did exactly what it's supposed to do. That means you need to clean it up, get back to work, do what you're supposed to do, but you don't have to call it in to the NRC and to the EPA. Now, you may have state requirements that you need to ensure that you're following, but under this program, the federal program, it's what hits the water that we're actually counting. Excuse me. So a 112.4, basically, like I said, if you have one spill of 1,000 gallons, right? Or if you have two spills of 42 gallons or more within any 12-month period, you have to submit a 112.4. So it doesn't have to be within a calendar year, any 12-month period. So if you have one barrel spill today, that means by April 22nd of next year, that's your 12-month period, right? So if you, excuse me, if you fit into this, basically you're going to submit a 112.4 to our office, right? Remember that when you have a sheen on the water, you have to contact the NRC always, but that is a separate requirement from 112.4. If you have a spill that reaches the water, you contact the NRC, right? Step one. Then if you have a large spill under SPCC, this is what you're going to submit to us, is a 112.4. And basically, here's the information that you guys are going to be submitting to us to let us know what happened, where it was, how much got in the water, what all you had to do, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of times, if we're looking at them and have a lot of questions, we may request that you send us a copy of your SPCC plan. And basically, what this does is it allows us to look at your plan to make sure you have the appropriate procedures and equipment and containment in place to prevent a spill. So if you've had a large spill or multiple spills, there may be something that needs to be adjusted in your plan. And these 112.4 let us know if there's big issues or multiple issues time and time again, and that allows the RA delegated down to my program to let you know, here are the changes we need you to make. Now, at the end of the slides, I should have the mailing address, email address, and everything. We've gone digital for years in Region 6, so it's pretty simple. You just have to email in your 112.4, and it'll go directly to the person that will take it, put it on file, all that kind of stuff. Every 112.4 that comes in, our document coordinator, she sends it my way. I review it. If it's something that we have more questions on or more issues with, I will reach out to the person that sent it in and ask more questions, get more information. So every one that you guys send in does get touched by the SPCC coordinator. It may take a while because I wear too many hats, but that's just the process. So make sure that you submit those because we put them on your file, and then if we come during an inspection, that is a question that it asks on the inspection reports. Did they have a spill? Did they submit the right documentation? So if we don't have it on file in your record, then you haven't done that, and it's something we have to mark no on the inspection report. And if anybody in the group has been inspected before, you want your inspection report to be yeses all the way down, right? You want it all to be good. All right, so 112.5 covers amendments by the actual plan, amendments to the plan by the actual owners and operators of the facility. 112.4 is all about us making changes to your plan because of multiple spills or large spills. 112.5 is all about you as the facility owner and operator making changes to your own plans, right? So like I said earlier, you got two different types of changes that y'all are making to the plan. And it's basically, excuse me, an administrative change or a technical change. An administrative change, like we talked about earlier, is pretty simple. If you're going to just change out some names and phone numbers and some quick verbiage and everything, that's just an administrative change. You can pencil whip it and make the changes, and you don't need to do anything else. Now, if you do a technical change, which is basically any change to anything that the PD set up in the plan, you basically are going to have another PD sign off on the amendment. So just some different examples of what a technical change is and can be would be the change out of containers, right? Piping, equipment. Even if you're changing out one container for the exact same container, it's still a change in the container, and the PE is supposed to sign off saying, yes, you basically changed it out for the right equipment, right? Construction or demolition or alter of secondary containment, right? There are very specific things that the secondary containment has to fall under that the PE is assigning off on. So if you change out your secondary containment, the PE's got to be able to sign off on it, right? Changes in product or service. If you are changing out product in a tank, that is specifically in the regulation and is considered a technical change, right? Because they are basically, they being the PE, are signing off that everything is compatible with what you are putting it in, right? So if you're putting a certain type of oil in a plastic tank that is corrosive and going to eat through the plastic, you can't put it in there. So this allows the PE to identify that, hey, you guys have put something that is compatible with it in there. We recommend to a lot of our big bulk terminals that change out products a lot, that the PE can sign off on in the plan saying that it can be used for these specific products. And then that way, at least it's been attested and you're following what they have. But if the PE does not want to set it up that way, that means every time you change out a product in a tank, you have to have a new PE attestation or certification. Now, one of the big questions that comes up a lot is the PE certifying the entire plan? Well, they can if you want them to, but that's up to you. If not, if they're only certifying the actual amendment itself, what they will normally do is have a PE certification, and at the bottom of it, they will put what exactly they are certifying, right? Just so that they know that their PE stamp is associated with just this amendment. Now, these PE certifications are kind of a living history with this SPCC plan. So just because you get a new one doesn't mean you throw the old one away, right? One of the questions that you're asked during an inspection is, were there any technical changes? Yes. Did they have a new PE certification within, right, 60 days? No. Yes. You've got to document and show here's the history of all these changes. So don't get rid of them. Keep them in there. Just throw the new one in there, and you'll always be able to answer the questions if you come to the point where you're being audited. It's always cover your butt when it comes to some of these things. Okay, amend them within 6 months, implement them ASAP. Because just because you make a change to your facility, if you have a spill that hits the water, you're still liable for it. So you need to get your plan implemented or as soon as possible and updated within the 6 months. Now, if you're in the state of Louisiana that has their SPCC program, you're going to follow some of these things that I have on the bottom, right? Like I said, first 10 years, I strictly stayed in Louisiana, went out with DEQ inspectors and everything. And so I did quite a few outreach sessions with the lead DEQ inspector, and then took a lot of those and added these to these slides. So if you have a facility in Louisiana, look at some of these that are at the bottom. They will help you out with their 33 subpart 905 plan. And basically a lot of their stuff is you have to make the change to your plan concurrently while you're making the changes to the facility. Sometimes it's a little different. So just make sure, just like everything else I say, this is a non-delegated program, but there is a portion of the SPCC regulation 112.7J that says you will follow the more stringent state requirements. So that section of your plan should list those more stringent state requirements so that you guys know you're actually following them. Okay. This one's fun because we just talked about it on our national call yesterday. So a lot of these questions that you guys have and bring up, we do what we call a tech call once a month where all of the inspectors and the programs get together with headquarters. Headquarters lets us know what's changing, what big ticket items have been coming up during inspections and from phone calls and everything else. And then, you know, we get to kind of discuss it and tell each other we're dumb and we don't know what we're doing and everything else. And they become comical sometimes. But this one was talked about yesterday, right? Complete a plan review and evaluation of the plan once every 5 years, right, from the date that your plan was put in place, right? And basically this is there to make sure that you're keeping up with the changes, right? I mean, you'd be surprised how many inspections I've been on where they had to dust off their book because they never used it, which is not a good thing. And that's a big thing for the plan writers that are listening in. If you don't write the plan to where these guys understand what they're reading, they're not going to use it, because I wouldn't either. So really be helpful to the field personnel by writing a plan that they actually understand. Now, so make a review of the plan every 5 years, right? We're not the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard requires a new plan every 5 years, right? That's certified and turned into their office. The EPA's SPCC plan is just reviewed to make sure everything's good, right? You know, only technical changes require a PE review and certification, like we just talked about. Everything else, go ahead and make sure that you've reviewed it, and there's a page that you're going to fill out. Now, documenting the plan review. It must document the plan review and evaluation, right? Now, this is where the discussion was interesting yesterday. The rule says that you must conduct the review and you must document that the review has been conducted, you being the facility owner and operator. Now, back in the day, we had plenty of consultants that had told the facilities that their 5-year reviews had to be done by the plan writer and signed off by the plan writer, right? But that's not actually what the regulation says. The regulation says that the facility owner operator must sign off on the documentation of the plan review. So you don't have to have your plan writer review the plan. You at the facility can designate somebody hopefully competent within the regulation and the plan to review it and make sure that nothing has changed, or if there's changes, what needs to be changed, right? But the facility owner and operator signs off on the documentation of that plan review. And then remember, if you have a technical change, get it with the PE, make sure the PE gets a certification in there. Now, how you document the plan review is kind of up to you guys. You can have an individual page, right? Because here's the certification you have to have. That basically for each review, you do a new page, you have the certification signed and dated. A lot of our plans, what we've seen is they'll just do the table format. They'll have the certification, it'll say a 5-year plan review at the top, and it will go ahead and have the certification. And then in the table, it'll say who did the review, what the date of the review, and what changes were made, right? And then that's completely fine. We'll look at that and say that that's completely fine. It's an easy way to track them. Another big question that always seems to come up is, excuse me, if you do a review within that 5 years, does your time start over? Now, we know that you guys make changes a lot of times to your plans and to your facility, so you may have a technical change that is updated. But if it's not a full review of the plan, your time doesn't start over. Now, if you are a facility that says, hey, I want to do a full review of our plan annually, then every time you do a full review, your 5-year clock starts again. So basically what we do when we come out to do an inspection is we're going to pull up this page or this table, however you guys have it set up, and we're going to go, awesome. The plan came around at this time, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here's the first review. Here's the second review. And we're just counting to 5. And if it's done within the 5 years, you're golden. If it takes longer than that, we have to check, no, it's not being done every 5 years. So every time you do a full review, your clock starts over. It's up to your company to decide if you want to do it more frequently than 5 years, that's great, because you guys should hopefully be touching these things more often than every 5 years. Okay, 9:30. I think we're stopping in a little while. All right, so 112.7 are the general requirements, remember, that everybody has to follow when they fall under the SPCC program. So remember, we're going to prepare in writing and in accordance with good engineering practice. And by in writing, digital is completely fine. We don't need a handwritten, typed, printed out copy of it. It's whatever's easiest. A lot of the times nowadays, I'll tell you, our production facility guys, some of them have binders they can't carry out with them, and sometimes it's just on their iPad, which is completely fine. It's been approved by management with authority to commit resources to fully implement the plan. It's got to be signed off by a manager who meets that criteria right there. That's the only criteria we have in there, right? They have to have the authority to commit resources to fully implement the plan. So it's up to the facility owner or operator to make sure they have the right person signing off on the plan, right? Procedures, methods, and equipment that are not yet fully operational can already be discussed and put in the plan, so you don't have to go back and redo the plan while they're being put in. So this doesn't happen as often, but a lot of times if you have a new plan coming into place and you're still building tanks and transfer areas and stuff like that, the engineer can go ahead and set up the plan with all that in place because it's already been planned for, it's already being put together. It's really up to you guys, but they do allow for that under 112.7. Okay, now, alternate plan formats. The way that the regulation reads is that you are supposed to write the plan in sequence specified by the rule, right? So you're going to write it in order of the regulation. Now, if you choose to not write it in order of the regulation, then what you can do is provide a detailed cross-reference. And by detailed, what we mean, and I've had to kind of change this a couple of times over the years, depending on which plan writer and facility owner is screaming at me. But basically, if you look at 112.7A on the right as the example, 112.7A3 actually has 6 different requirements, right? Most of the time, they are not in the exact same section in the plan. So each individual line item of the regulation should be accounted for and where their specific location is in the plan. So I used to say page number, but page numbers fluctuate depending on the changes that you're making. So down to what specific section it is in is what you need. These things should be able to be found quickly when needed. So what you don't want to have is 112.7A3 in section 4. Well, section 4 could be 50 pages long. They didn't have such searching information. Remember, these plans for the facility owner and operators, the guys that are actually doing work, the information that they're needing, so if they can't find it, they're not gonna do it. So you've got to make it super simple. And let me tell you what, if Tom and I can't find it in the first couple of minutes, then your plan is not set up easily. And we do this every single day. So we can surf through a plan quickly, find exactly what's needed because we do 100 or 2 of these a year. You know, it's pretty simple for us. So each line item, specific locations within the plan, it's for ease of finding the information. Environmental equivalence. I normally just blow past this one, right? Because most people do not do environmental equivalence, but there are some technical requirements that you can choose, you as the PE, you can choose to set up something equivalent to what is called for in the regulation, right? Because it just works better for that facility. So if you're going to use environmental equivalence, make sure that there is a full environmental equivalence section that explains why you're doing it, everything else, because it's still got to be approved by us that, yes, we agree that that works. There is an entire section in environmental equivalence in the guidance document. So if it's something you're looking at doing, in there, it'll have a table that says specifically which ones you cannot use environmental equivalence for. Like it says, accept secondary containment requirements, because secondary containment is the big thing, right? It's the most important thing. Is if you have a spill, is it in containment? Because the containment's going to keep it from getting in the water. So you can't use environmental equivalence there. You have to have containment. But the majority of the other portions of 112.7 through 112.12 do have an environmental equivalence component. So if it is something that works for your facility, please review that guidance, that section in the guidance document, and it'll explain it so much more than I ever could, because I have only seen one in the last 13 years. All right, so items addressed in the plan, right? You're going to give the type of oil in each container and its storage capacity. Now, this right here is 112.7 A3 that I just used as an example before. Now, at the very beginning of this, let me tell you one of the biggest things that gets gigged on almost every SPCC inspection is the very first line item of 112.7 A3 that is not on this slide says that you will give a description of your facility, including a specific amount of information, and provide a diagram. They're two different requirements. So you can't just refer to diagram to see the description of the facility. You actually have to have a narrative that explains purpose of your facility, what type of tanks do you guys have, how is it set up, all that kind of stuff. So just make sure within your plan you have a narrative explaining your facility description and a corresponding diagram that matches your narrative. And then what we're going to do is make sure your narrative matches your diagram, matches your facility, right? So that's a big thing. I always forget to add it to the PowerPoint, but that is a big thing that we gig when we're on inspections, because everybody just refer to diagram. Remember, you guys are paying a lot of money usually for these plans, so just make sure they write them the way it should be so you guys don't get in trouble at the back end of it also. All right, so 112.7 A3 also includes type of oil in each container. So a lot of time that's just going to be your tank chart that you throw in your plan. That's completely fine with us. Discharge prevention measures, including procedures for routine handling of products, right? Transfer procedures, all those kind of things that are, they should be there. They should be explaining, here's how you conduct transfers, right? So it should lay it out specifically what they need to do during the transfer, during a transfer that is occurring at your facility. Now, the problem usually is that your transfer procedures are in your operations manual or they're in this other manual. There are only two things that you're allowed to skip over or refer to your FRP on. Everything else has to be in the plan, right? So your facility has to have procedures for transferring of oil products, and those procedures need to be in the plan. And that'll be the first thing. If you have a spill and they send Tom or I out to figure out what happened, one of the first things we're going to do is go pull me your transfer procedures. And then we're going to go through the procedures. Did the truck do this? Did they do this? Did they do this? Did they do this? And I've been to spills where they had 3,000 gallons of diesel go directly into the water, and they didn't even have procedures in their plan. So we immediately said they weren't following procedures because they didn't have any. Okay, so make sure they're actually in your plan. You can't refer elsewhere to them, so just copy and paste them in there. You need to discuss your discharge and drainage controls, right? This is going to be discussed elsewhere in the plan, which is why a lot of people choose to have a cross-reference so they don't duplicate the information. You have to discuss the countermeasures for discharge, discovery, response, and cleanup, right? So remember, out of 250,000 SPCC sites here in Region 6, only 1,000 of them have facility response plans, which are all about responding to spills. So that means your SPCC plan needs to have the basic information you need to follow to respond to a spill and clean up a spill at your facility, right? So if you don't have that, we're going to gig you on that. Methods of disposal and recovery materials, right? You got to be able to follow the regulations that they have for disposing of whatever product it is you're recovering. So that information should be in here so that the facility manager or whoever is responsible for cleanup after a spill If they don't know exactly what they're supposed to do, the plan lays it out for them. It already tells them what's going on. A lot of our SPCC plans will tell them, hey, here are our local facilities where you can transport this, the products to, the recovered products to. It'll already be listed in there. What permits you may possibly need, all that kind of stuff needs to be in there. Just so if that person does not know everything and doesn't know exactly what to do, this tells them exactly what to do so they stay in compliance and stay out of trouble. And then a contact list of phone numbers, including the NRC, right? Because remember, any spill that hits the water, excuse me, if it makes a sheen, you guys get to call the NRC and harass the Coast Guard, right? That's just is what it is. So make sure it's in there. If you have an FRP that is separate from this, you can't just refer to the FRP for the phone numbers. It's not one that was set up there. So you have to have the phone numbers in the SPCC plan. Now, if you have no FRP, then you also need to have in there what information needs to be followed for reporting protocols and procedures, organized portions of the plan describing procedures for when a discharge occurs to make them readily available during an emergency. Those are big things. Now, if you have an FRP, there's a long section right there, which is basically notification procedures, right? It's much more than's on the slide. So just look at that. If you have an FRP, you don't need that information. If you do not have an FRP, you have to have that information because that's what's telling you to contact the NRC, what information you need to have gathered before you call the NRC. You should have a notification form basically in your plan that the guys just fill out because you don't want to call the NRC with no information, right? Take the time really quick, jot down the information you know they're going to need, then you call the NRC, the state requirements that you have to follow, and then that way as they're asking the facility questions on size, what happened, what product, you already have all of that information together, and that's why it's set up that way in the plan. Excuse me. All right, so facility diagram. Remember, we had to put all that information as a narrative in there, and it needs to also include a facility diagram. Now, the diagram is set up interestingly, and there's a lot of things that I will tell you, I don't understand why they did some of these things the way they did them. There are different requirements between the SPCC portion of the plan and an FRP diagram. But then they ask us to look for everything, so it makes it kind of interesting. But basically, you're describing in your plan the physical layout of your facility, and you include a diagram. Okay, that's exactly what it says in the rule. So you have to describe in your facility that narrative we talk about, and I bring it up a couple of times because we want everything in there so that everybody walks away from an inspection happy, right? All right, so it's going to supplement the facility's description, right, which may include location, type, size, proximity to navigable waters, all that kind of stuff, right? It includes completely buried tanks that are otherwise exempted from the rule. It provides enough detail to undertake prevention activities, perform inspections, and take response measures. Let me tell you what, we use diagrams all the time on a response because it kind of tells us where everything is, what direction things are flowing in. So it's a quick picture of what to do. So that's why these things are in there. And it includes intra-facility gathering lines that are otherwise exempted from the rule. So basically these things should have your piping, your containers, your secondary containment, your transfer areas, all that kind of stuff. Now, if you're a larger facility, refineries, bulk terminals, where you have a huge amount of piping, they already wrote in there that overlay diagrams showing the different portions of piping systems may be used so that basically you don't muddle up your diagram and make it difficult to read. So basically, and the way we look at an overlay is not specifically an overlay that you would think of. But if you have a facility PID that has all your piping and everything on it, we're okay to look at that. If you're a small facility with just simple intra-facility piping and gathering lines, then just having it drawn out on your diagram works for us also. Okay, excuse me. So facility diagrams, like I said, is kind of interesting. On the left side is everything that is required under the SPCC rule, right? Location and contents of your tanks, everything completely buried, connecting, piping, transfer stations. And then what they have as recommended is containment, storm drains, direction of flow, right, to scale, all that kind of stuff. So, but in our inspection report, it asks us to look for everything. So most of your plan writers will put everything already on your diagram because it makes it so much easier. And then if you happen to move into the FRP world, all of those things plus more are actually required to be on your diagram. So those are all the requirements that we should have on there. Let's see, for mobile and portable containers, those things move around all the time. So we don't expect your diagram to show where they're going to be throughout the day. Basically, if you have a drum and tote storage area, we ask that you identify that on your diagram. And then of course, the drums and totes are going to be moved around through the day, usually being used for work. So make sure they're provided the right size secondary containment, but then when they're being stored at night, left, they should be in those areas, and those areas are identified on your diagram. All right, this is just the headquarters example on what they want to see. Right, so you've got your transfer areas, you have your piping, you have your containment, you have your tanks. Of course, it's kind of difficult to change the diagrams, or at least that's what facilities tell me. So that's why they have them set up like this, where it's just tank 1, tank 2, tank 3, and then those work with a corresponding chart, so you know exactly what's in them, especially if you're a bulk terminal that lease out your tanks and the product change frequently. It's easier to change the table than it is the diagram. So this is just an example of how you guys should do it. It's amazing. It doesn't say exactly how you have to do it. I've seen it in marker. So, you know, as long as the information's on there, we're going to give you credit. Just make sure you guys have all of the information that they're requiring. And then, of course, this is just an example of the tank charts that the majority of facilities have in their plans. It has their identification of what tank it is. It corresponds with the diagram, so you can know exactly what's in everything. Okay, failure analysis. Right after 112.7A3 is your failure analysis. I think it's 112.7B. Oh, it's at the bottom. So this is basically where you indicate reasonable potential for equipment failure. So basically, you're going to predict what is going to happen during a failure for each type of equipment that you have, right? So all your different tanks, process vessels, transformers, you know, all of that kind of stuff. Basically, you're going to be doing a prediction. This kind of lets you know, this is part of the planning to say, hey, if I have a spill, here's where it's going to come from. Here's the direction it's going to be going. Here's how fast it can be moving, all that kind of stuff, so that you know how to respond when you have a spill. So by direction, it means what direction it's headed, right? North, south, east, or west, not in containment, right? That'd be great. If every spill happened and stayed in containment, we wouldn't even have to have any of these discussions, because that means everybody's doing exactly what they're supposed to do. But we have spills every day. I think we average something like 3 to 4 spills every single day in this region, the last time I saw the count put together. So that's just what it happens. So you've got to know on an SPCC facility what directions it's headed. So if you have a spill from your tank, it gets out of containment and it's headed east, then your guys know, as a part of the planning and training and everything else, that they need to head east to get ahead of it, to put out sausage boom or whatever it is that's a part of your response protocols in your plan, right? So not in containment, actually what direction it's going to go when it gets outside of it. Rate of flow, the engineer is going to calculate it. I can't even tell you how to calculate that, but you know, it's required to be on there, so make sure that it's on there. And total quantity of oil, which could be discharged. So what I can tell you is it's up to you guys on how you want to put it in your plan. But a lot of times what we see is this information seems to be added to the tank chart as a column, just because all that information is already there. All your different tanks, your equipment, what their capacities are. So it's easy for the plan writers to just throw it in there, and then they work to correspond with that diagram, what spill flow direction and everything is. So remember, all this is up to you guys on how you want to do it. The government doesn't tell you specifically in this program you must do it this way. We just tell you you have to have the information in there. All right, record keeping. All right, remember, you should have written procedures of your tests, right? And inspections and kept with your plan. Now remember, written, we've already talked about it. Digital is completely fine. If you're going to keep digital records of your inspections, then you just need to make sure that they follow the requirements, which basically mean that they've been signed off by the appropriate supervisor or inspector. So have the inspector's name on there, or supervisor's name, of course, the date that it was conducted. They're maintained with the SPCC plan. So remember, they don't have to be in the plan. They just have to be with it. So they're at the facility so we can pull the records. And then they've got to be maintained for at least 3 years, right? So inspection records for us are 3 years. Now, if you're a part of the integrity testing program and you fall under like API 653, it says you should keep your records for the life of that tank. So make sure you're following the industry standards because a lot of that stuff is helpful when we talk about integrity testing. But for us, we're going to look at the last 3 years worth of records that you guys have. Records and inspections tests kept under normal or usual and customary business practices, right? And that's where electronic copies come in. Drainage records, you have, depending on the type of drainage you're doing, you may have DMRs, you may have drainage logs. So whatever the customary practice is for the specific type of record, just make sure it's available so that it can be pulled up and reviewed during your inspections. Now, let me bring up one thing about tank inspections. One of the big thing that we see is in the regulation, it says you're supposed to do tank inspections, not tank battery inspections, tank farm inspections, tank inspections. So each individual tank needs to be shown that it has been inspected. So that doesn't mean you have to have 1 page per tank. You can have multiple tanks on a page, but most of the ways that that is done is you may have a table set up where you have all the different items that you're going to be looking for each individual tank, and then each individual tank shown by itself, so you can check off that each tank has looked at each individual item. So a lot of them that run to when we're out there is they'll have tank farm 1, which may have 15 tanks, and then there'll be a comment at the bottom that says tank is rusted and needs repairs. Great. Which tank was that? You know, because there's nothing corresponding with it. So we do enforce in this region that each individual tank has to be shown to have been inspected for the criteria that they have to follow. So it's up to you guys how you make that work, but just know that that's something we're going to be looking for. Okay. Personnel training, right? Remember, this is SPCC. This is not FRP. This is not OSHA. This is not Coast Guard. This is not any of that other kind of stuff, right? This is SPCC. So when we're talking about SPCC training, each plan and SPCC training should account for those 5 items right there, right? Operation and maintenance of prevention equipment, discharge procedures and protocols, all applicable pollution control laws, rules, and regulations. So not just 40 CFR 112, but if you fall under Coast Guard 154, if you fall under, HAZWOP or anything else, they should be covering those regulations as a part of this annual training, right? General facility operations and the contents of the SPCC plan. These things are required to be doing at least once a year, right? So if you say you spend 15 minutes on these once a year, that is a lot of information to get in 15 minutes. So make sure you actually have a good training platform put together. I mean, y'all can see we're going over SPCC in 5 hours, and we're not even talking about specifics of some things. So you should have a good program set up for your personnel. Your personnel should know it's SPCC training, right? Your documentation should say SPCC training. One of the biggest problems that we run into when we're out in the field, when we pull training records for SPCC at the top, it will say safety training. SPCC is not safety training. SPCC is spill prevention training, totally different. So if you're going to combine safety training with SPCC training, which a lot of companies do on a monthly basis when they're doing their safety reviews and everything else, make sure it says SPCC. If you hand us records for SPCC and it doesn't say it on there, we won't give you credit for it because we can't just assume that it's SPCC training. And a lot of times how I fact check when I'm in the field, if the guys are doing SPCC and if they even know what SPCC is I will look and find that one guy that saw me and tries to go the other direction and start asking questions, right? So make sure your people know this simple stuff. This is SPCC training. If you're asked, do you take SPCC? Yes, these are the components. Because if they can't answer any of the questions, they're not really taking SPCC training, right? So make sure they're taking it annually, make sure it covers those 5 topics, and make sure that your records show that you're taking SPCC. It is okay if they're doing computer-based training, right? If your company does that, we will have you pull up the records for each individual person, go through, yes, they're doing SPCC. We actually go through, especially if you're a smaller facility, everybody who's oil handling is required to do SPCC training. So what we will do is go through and check and go, okay, this one's got it, this one's got it, this one's got it. Whoa, what happened to this guy here? If you're not doing computer-based training and you're doing classroom training, sign-in sheets are completely fine. Sometimes we will compare the sign-in sheets with the rosters, right? So just make sure you guys have records to show that, yes, you're doing the training. And then, of course, you have to designate, each facility designates a person accountable for discharge prevention and who is responsible to facility management, right? Not a position, a person, right? Not a title. It's Mike is responsible for discharge prevention, right? And then if Mike leaves and Bob's in there, that's one of those administrative changes. You pencil whip it and say, look, Bob's now in charge of that. So that's what we're going to be looking for. Okay. Secondary containment, right? 112.7C, right? There's multiple types of containment depending on the type of facility, type of equipment, and everything that goes in this. The general requirements are under 112.7C. They give you all the different options of what you can use for secondary containment. Now, general secondary containment is just going to be most probable spill. Size secondary containment is actually going to hold the size of the largest tank plus freeboard. So then that's where it comes down to what type of equipment are we talking about, right? And there are alternative options for qualified oil field operational equipment and flow lines that have been built into the regulation, but everything else that doesn't have approved alternative requirements must either have most probable spill, which is general secondary containment, or size secondary containment, depending on. Oh, rail car containment. This is something I added because it's something that we keep running into. Like I said, the rail cars themselves, when they are transporting oil to and from different locations, they're in transportation mode. So they fall under railroad, right? DOT, all that kind of stuff. But basically, once they get to the facility and they're at their final destination on their bill of lading, right? A lot of times what's happened is those cars are pulled out on a rail spur and parked until they're either leaving or refueling, unfueling, loading, all that kind of stuff while they're just parked in those areas, right, on those spurs. They're not connected, they're not moving, they're actually storing that oil. So that means they fall under EPA jurisdiction, and those rail cars are required to have secondary containment just like they were an AST, right? So a little bit different. And I had to go back and actually find this during a very nice, polite discussion I was having at a facility. And they were like, you're full of baloney. So I found this, and it really, this is what it is. So the loading or unloading of a rail car may mark the end to the transportation process. So a lot of times those rail cars are unloaded at the facility, they're parked, then they're loaded, and they're parked while loaded until they're actually leaving the facility. So if they're at their initial part on their bill of lading, or they're at their final destination, and they're parked on a rail spur, just sitting with product in them, then they're actually storing, right? And this was one of the letters that headquarters has provided to show that, hey, this does meet storage under EPA, and that means those rail spurs are required to have size secondary containment also, and it's up to the facility to point it out. So we'll walk and actually look at them when we're out there. So it's something that needs to be in your plan also. If you have rail spurs, it needs to be discussed in your plan, how they provide secondary containment, all of that kind of stuff. Okay, right, and like I said, the guidance document is great in providing the role of the EPA inspector in evaluating everything. And if it's something new and interesting, then it's something we'll have to go back and read to figure out how we're supposed to evaluate it. But secondary containment is pretty easy, right? We're going to read what your plan says you have in place. And then we're going to go out in the field and verify that what's in the plan that the PE is signed off on is actually there at the facility, right? So we're going to look and see if they say that it's a 3-foot dike wall, we're going to see that there's a 3-foot dike wall. If it says it's a 6-foot berm, it better be a 6-foot berm all the way around. The problem is that normally you have erosion and everything else that the facilities don't keep up with. And if they don't keep up with it, then we have to gig them because they're not following what the containment is set up for. If you got cracks, discolorations, broken parts of the wall, if we have time, I will show you some pictures of what we see out there, you know, and just so you can kind of get an idea of what it is we're looking for. But all of those things, we're going to walk around your different areas and assess to make sure that the containment that is there at the facility is what is required under the plan. So, you know, we're going to make sure if you have a concrete dike wall and concrete base and you have plants growing up through them, that's not really meeting it because there's an avenue for a spill to get out of it. That brings up that excess vegetation, right? You are not allowed to have large rooted vegetation within your secondary containment. So that means no bushes, no trees, stuff like that, because their root system is an avenue for a spill to get outside of secondary containment. So grass, completely fine. Weeds, I mean, that's completely fine. But let me tell you what, Tom loves to write mow your lawn on the inspection report, just because you have a lot of overgrown areas. Well, if it's overgrown around the tanks, then basically how can you do your inspections? Because your inspections are from the base and foundation of the tank to the top of the tank. So if the whole base of the tank is surrounded by 3 foot of weeds, how are you actually doing your inspection? So we're going to actually look and see and bring that up. So that's why it says excess vegetation. Holes in penetration in the containment system, you know, whether it's animal burrows, whether it's piping that had ran through previously and then was pulled out and then they never sealed the holes. I've seen that plenty of times. So we're going to actually walk around your containment and make sure that it meets what it is required per your plan, per the PE. All right, sufficiently impervious. We'll do this one, and then I saw the 5-minute warning. And that's where I pause, as I figured out how to put the chat up on my other screen, so I kind of take a peek every now and then at it. So to go along with secondary containment is sufficiently impervious. One of the things that the PE signs off on is that, is the containment sufficiently impervious which means that it must be capable of containing oil and must be constructed so that any discharge will not escape containment before cleanup occurs, right? So if you're using sand and shell, that's not impervious. A spill goes directly through those, and in whatever direction it's going to flow. You know, down here where we're at, you've got a clay type soil that seems to do well. The engineer is going to go ahead and say, all right, this is good. Concrete, good, as long as there's no cracks and big issues with it. So the PE is going to sign off and say, yes, that is it is impervious. Now, we had a spill a couple of years ago that made it out of a containment into a marsh area. We couldn't really figure out how it got out, with the exception is it was really sandy and shelly, so and had shell, so it made it out through there. And the PE wanted to know how the EPA evaluates that, and headquarters basically said, here, go to the guidance document. And so I went to the guidance document, and the guidance document says it's up to you to identify that. So, you know, if you're coastal and every time the tide comes in, it comes in and up through your containment and then goes back out through your containment, it's probably not impervious. But if it holds water and holds oil to where it doesn't soak into the ground, make it out through the containment, you know, then it probably is going to meet it. It's just up to the PE to do whatever it is, whether it's core samples or whatever, to show that it will hold water and product in there so that it can be cleaned up. Then that's what needs to also be put in the plan, is that they're saying, yes, it is impervious. So I think that's a good stopping point.
All right, Chris, that'd be great. Now, we do have one question before we go break. So, under the SPCC, would streams, ditches connected to navigable waters be considered a reportable structure?
So, am I on? I don't look muted. Okay, so that's the whole WOTUS thing that I try and stay away from. If it would be considered a WOTUS under the newest regulation, then yes, if you have a spill that hits a water body that is defined under the newest, craziest version of WOTUS, then yes, you would have to call the NRC for that.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris. That's going to lead us into break.